Hey, you're back with the Get Out Deck Guy. I'm Steve Rowe, the old Get Out Deck Guy. And with me, as always, is Damon Day, the new Get Out Deck Guy. Damon, say hello.
Hello.
Today we have a topic that I'm very conflicted about. I think Damon and I have similar and differing opinions on this at the same time. Damon brought up the idea of, we should talk about borrowing from your 401k or your home equity line of credit or something in order to deal with your debt. And Damon, you have some strong opinions. You were just sharing them before we had to restart the podcast. So please relaunch your rant.
I do. It's not really a rant. It's just I wanted to do this podcast today because I talk about this stuff almost every day. It comes up pretty much with every client I have because when you're looking at different options, nothing's off the table. You want to look at everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, hold on a second. I forgot to mute my phone and it's beeping at me.
Got a money question keeping you up at night? Well, don't just Google it. Get real answers from real people who actually know what they're talking about. Head to getoutofdebt.org/podcast to ask your question, and you might hear it on an upcoming episode. But hey, if you'd rather keep it private, Damon Day has your back. Visit DAMONDAY.com because getting out of debt is easier with the right help. That's getoutofdebt.org/podcast, where smart money questions lead to smarter money moves.
And so I have these discussions with clients all the time, and I can say 100%, in my opinion,
Yeah.
that there are really good times where you should consider tapping into 401k, home equity loan, get personal loans, things like that. And there's also some times where it's a horrible idea. And the thing that I kind of rail against, if you will, is when you get these gurus out there that are always just one-sided. Never do this, never do this, never do that.
Mm-hmm.
And to a certain extent, I get it because, they're on the radio or I guess that just dated me, even though I'm the new Get Out of Debt. I'm old talking about who listens to the radio. What's the radio? So on podcasts or streaming content or wherever you get your information from, there'll be people that say, never do this, never, ever, ever. But there's absolutely times you should, and there's times you shouldn't. So I wanted to do this podcast today to just talk about different circumstances where it should be considered and when it is an absolute no-no. Because I know a lot of people are wrestling with that, where they have this debt, they're struggling every month, and they're thinking, well, maybe I'll pull from my 401k, and what are my options there? Can I borrow money? Can I withdraw money? Because different 401k plans have different rules too, so you have to learn what those rules are.
Yeah.
Or they think maybe I could just we got equity in the house. We've been in this house for 10 years, and the market has gone up, and maybe we could pull money out and pay for the debt that way or get a consolidation loan. And these are all things that consumers, are thinking about and struggling with. And unfortunately, a lot of them just kind of do one or the other without having an overall plan. And oftentimes, by the time they get to me, they've already done these things. They've already pulled money from the 401k or they've pulled money from the house, and they didn't fix the overall situation, or they went into it without really having a plan and a strategy. And what happens very often is that debt creeps back up, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly, onto those cards that just got paid off with that home equity loan or the 401k loan. And now they have the debt again a year and a half later, and now have this new 401k loan or this new home equity loan. So it's important to not do anything until you have a strategy and a plan before you even think about touching any of that stuff.
Well, I mean, here's a good example. I can think of a couple examples of past clients that their knee-jerk reaction was to try to borrow their way out of debt. And they were going to borrow money from their, I think it was a 401k is the one that comes to mind. And the guy was going to pay off his debt.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, whoa, hold on a minute. This is absolutely what you want to do. I'm not going to tell you not to do it. I'll tell you why I'm conflicted about it. But you could probably settle this debt for a lot less than you're going to pull out because you think that's the best way to do it. Now, the reason I'm conflicted about this approach is I have run into human nature far too many times, which is exactly what you said. People borrow from whatever it is, and they say, I'm never going to get back in debt again. And then not long later, it seems, they're in deeper than they were before. And here's the part about the 401k that drives me crazy, especially right now when I think about what I believe the stock market is going to do, is if you borrow from your 401k, and let's say you're paying 5% interest back on your plan, that loan is not costing you 5%. If the stock market blows up and goes up 15% next year, you're losing out on that too. So that loan is actually costing you 20% to borrow on it because you're not getting the appreciation on the money that you would have left in the market. The other thing is, as you said, Damon, you have to read and understand your 401k loan documents very, very carefully, because some of them actually say that if you have a separation from employment, whether you're laid off or fired or quit, that loan is due immediately. So
that is true.
You need a plan.
So let's unpack your conflict, because that comes up a lot. And I agree with you and then disagree at the same time.
Awesome.
This is going to get very confusing in some circumstances, right? So you are 100% correct. If you pull money out, whether you withdraw money, let's just talk about 401ks for right now.
Mm-hmm.
You withdraw money, take the penalty, whatever, or you borrow from it, that whatever you take out, say $50,000, right? Let's say you have 50 grand in debt and you're thinking, I'm going to take 50 grand out of my 401k, pay off the debt. Now, the first issue that you brought up about, debt creeping back up, that you don't want to take money out of the 401k because you might get back into debt in the future. That's actually two different problems that have to be solved separately. One is we got to get rid of the debt. And then the second problem is, now let's not get you back into debt in the first place. But those are two separate but connected situations, right?
Right.
But as far as that idea of you will lose out on the market gain, you are correct. If whatever money you have out is not going to be earning any money. Now, that has an element of understanding and timing of the market. We're talking about short term. What's the market going to do in the next 5 years? Nobody knows. It could just as easily go down in the short term over 5 years. And then you go, okay, I actually missed out on the losses that happened.
Right.
So nobody has a crystal ball, number one. So we don't know. The thing that we know is that we don't know what the market will do. But here's what we do know. And this is how I look at it in many cases. We know for sure that we don't know what the market will do, but we also know for sure that you're paying 25% interest right now today on this 50,000. So by pulling money out, there's an unknown there. Pulling money out of the 401k is an unknown. But if we take money out and we pay off that debt, whether we settle it or pay it in full or whatever it is, what we know for sure though is that you now are no longer paying $12,000+ a year in interest on the credit card side, because these things are connected. So while it's true you might miss out on some gains, we know for sure you're going to miss out on the interest that you're being charged right now. So then when you start looking at it from that standpoint, now the bet is kind of, okay, is the market going to go up more than 25% a year? Because that's what I'm going to for sure save if I take the money out and pay this. So there is the other side of that coin that nobody tends to talk about that much, is if you pull the money out because you want to buy a car, well, then Dave Ramsey's got a valid argument. That's stupid. Don't do that. But if you're pulling the money out to immediately get rid of a 25% a year cost, right? Then even if you do lose out on a 10% gain, you're still coming out ahead. So there is that needs to be weighed.
Well, you and I agree, disagree, agree, disagree.
But we'll wrap it up at the end so you'll know what to do, maybe.
No. So, I absolutely agree that there are times that it makes sense to do it. And you raise a very valid argument. That's a good argument. What I disagree with are people who have that knee-jerk reaction to just go and borrow from that, thinking that there are no consequences or things to think about without that plan that you mentioned.
Oh, we agree on that. So
Yeah.
there's no disagreement there.
Yeah.
Nothing should be done without a plan. Don't just charge. Don't do, what do they say? Shoot, ready, aim.
Yeah.
Or whatever that is. Let's not do that.
Yeah. I am not against somebody borrowing from their 401k, understanding what the plan is and understanding, they're working with you. Oh, I forgot to tell people. Hey, if you want to reach Damon, go to damonday, DAMONDAY.com. Or they're working with you because I bet if I pressed you, you could come up with a bunch of examples of people who were eager and ready to go borrow from their home equity or 401k or whatever. And you said, whoa, hold on. We got to time this. We need a plan.
100%.
Yeah.
And not only that, you first have to figure out what the overall situation is. And a lot of people, they tend to get tunnel vision. What I found over the years is they get tunnel vision on, I got to lower the interest. I got to lower the interest.
Yeah.
I got to lower the interest. And so that's when they end up getting into trouble with personal loans. Oh, I'm going to get this consolidation loan from this company for $30,000 and it's going to be at 15%. So I'm going to get that $30,000 loan and then I'm going to pay off $30,000 worth of credit card debt at 25%. So therefore it's better. Right. And they just get this tunnel vision on lower interest is always better. But what they fail to realize in many cases is, yeah, they have a debt problem, but more immediate, they have a cash flow problem.
Right.
And getting that consolidation loan tends to actually increase the burden on the cash flow, the immediate cash flow, because those minimum payments on that 5-year consolidation loan tend to be the same or higher, or even if it's a little bit lower than the minimum payments on those credit cards. But they just get so stuck on, well, I got to lower my interest rate, so I'm going to do that. And then what they don't realize until it's too late, they've already done it, is now with these new payments on the new consolidation loan, they haven't addressed the underlying issue of why you have more going out than you have coming in. And now we've got this new payment on the consolidation loan. Now we've got this freed up credit cards. We just paid off this $30,000. Great, we're winning. Yeah. Oh, wait, I'm a little bit short here. I'm a little bit short here. I got to put that on the credit card. And then a year later, that $30,000 is charged back up on that credit card. And we have the $1,000 a month on this new consolidation loan. Right? So we don't want to ready, aim, fire, or a fire, ready, aim, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
We want to ready, aim, fire.
Right. I'm a firm believer in there's no sense wasting a perfectly good mistake. I mean, if you got into a debt situation and you're reaching out for help, you're smart enough to reach out for help. You don't need to beat yourself up, but we need to learn from the mistake. As I just did another video, and in it was a quote from Nelson Mandela, who said, "I always succeed because I either accomplish my goal or I learn." Right? It's the same thing we need to do here. We need to understand how you got into this situation to begin with, just so we don't repeat it, or so you're aware and you see it coming.
Yeah. Because let's say we sit down and we figure out that a Chapter 7 bankruptcy absolutely makes sense. We go over the reasons why, and we look at all the different strategies and options, and we come to the conclusion that, you know what, a Chapter 7 makes sense. Now, granted, nobody calls me and says, you know what, I really hope you recommend a Chapter 7.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. But it's good to walk through it and then really understand what it is. And again, it's not something I recommend all the time. Well, I only recommend it when it makes the most sense.
Right.
But here's a good example. So we don't want to, let's say a client does a ready, fire, aim and pulls money out of a 401k because they're panicked. They can't make the payments. They're starting to fall behind. Debt collectors are calling. They're not sure what to do. The only real asset they have is money in a 401k. They talk to the HR or whoever's handling their 401k, and they say, oh yeah, you could borrow $50,000 out.
Yep.
Okay. So they borrow it and they pay off a whole bunch of credit cards, and they still have an underlying issue where a Chapter 7 still makes the most sense. Now we're in a pickle.
Yeah.
Right. Because now we've taken $50,000 out of a protected account that would have survived the bankruptcy intact. And now we've paid off credit cards. So now you've essentially I've not taken the Chapter 7 off the table, but you've essentially just wasted $50,000 for no reason.
Oh, wait.
If we still need to file the Chapter 7.
It's way more than that.
Well,
Because,
that's true.
let me put on the thing that bothers me most, the hat that bothers me the most about this is you took the 50 grand out. Life happens. You can't get back to repaying it on any sort of, quick time or whatever. That 50 grand that you took out now, I've seen people take out money and then pay the 10% penalty on it and never repay it. And if they had just left it in there, that 50 grand when they go to retire could be 300 grand.
Yeah.
So you're not pissing away 50, you're pissing away 300 if you don't do it with some sort of plan and approach.
Yeah, because that's where that plan comes in. Here's the key. When it comes down to, should I pull money from a 401k or not? What are you going to use the money for?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you want to compare apples to apples, say, well, I'm going to use it to get rid of this. I'm going to take 50 grand out and settle my $100,000 worth of credit card debt with that 50 grand. And that's going to save me $25,000 a year. Not that people would do this, but if you're going to argue apples to apples and say, I'm going to take that $25,000 a year that I'm saving now by taking this 50 grand out, and I'm going to put that into an investment account for the next 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
then that's apples to apples, right?
Yep.
But if they're going to say, I need to take out this 50 grand because I really want to buy this car, well, then yeah, you have a valid argument. That car didn't cost you 50 grand. That car cost you 300 grand because you just took that money out and I don't think there's probably anybody listening to this podcast that's ever either thought about or actually took money out of the 401k and bought a car. I could be wrong, but I don't think that's something they're stressed about.
No. They're not listening to this podcast, but I can guarantee you a lot of people have done that.
Like, wait a minute. If I could get a 6% interest rate on my 401k and that interest goes back to me, why do I need the bank? I'll just pull the money out and buy the car cash. I'll walk in there. Here's my check.
I've heard that a lot of times over the years.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
No.
But it can make a lot of sense if it's done in a strategic way, and it allows you to get rid of a much larger expense than you would be potentially missing out on by pulling the money out of the 401k. But all of those angles have to be looked at before you make that decision, and absolutely do not pull money out of your 401k until you've ruled out that you're in a situation that a bankruptcy is not going to make sense. Is not going to make sense for.
Right.
Because you do not want to take money out of a protected account and then the next month go, oh, I really should file a Chapter 7.
Yeah, you absolutely don't want to do that.
Now, if you still have the cash, if you haven't used it, you could pay the loan back early, but then it brings in some potential issues of how long you have to wait potentially to file bankruptcy and things like that.
Yeah.
But it still would be better if you make the decision first before you take any money out of a 401k, either from a loan or from a withdrawal, especially.
Yeah, and then you got the thing of, for some reason, a lot of people can't hold on to the money. It's burning a hole in their pocket, right? So you take it out early, planning to use it 8 months from now. It goes poof.
Well, again, those are two separate issues.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
You have to make the decision on what you're going to use that money for, and then you also have to address the issue of, hey, don't spend it on something else. But that's a separate issue. And Steve brought up a good point, too. I want to circle back before I forget. He brought up a thing that a lot of people are not aware of and don't think about, but it has to be considered. And that is, if you borrow money from the 401k, yes, it is true that the interest that you're going to pay right now, it's 6%, maybe 7%. The interest is going back into your account. So you're essentially going to be your own bank when you pull the money out. But and then there's no penalty for borrowing, but there is a clause in most 401ks, if not all of them, that if you change employment, lose your job, quit, and you don't repay that loan in full, usually within 60 days, then it will be converted. Whatever you still have outstanding will be converted to essentially a withdrawal, subject to the rules of 401k withdrawal, which would be you now owe whatever taxes would be due on that. You have to essentially claim it as income,
plus
and
the
then
penalty.
You have to pay a 10% penalty.
Yeah.
So that has to be factored in, and sometimes you have no control over that. if you get let go, your company's downsizing, you have no control over that. So if you are going to take a withdrawal, you have to do it with the knowledge that worst case scenario, I mean, if you're going to borrow, you have to do it with the knowledge that, hey, in the worst case scenario, this could turn into a withdrawal before I pay it back. Am I prepared for those consequences as well? And if that does happen, would this loan still make sense right now? I mean, if I had to pay taxes and then got hit with that penalty, would this end up being still a good thing? If not, maybe we don't want to do it.
Another thing to think about is if you're taking the 401k loan out now and you're going to use it to settle the debt, there is no reason why you can't start, because you're going to stop paying on those cards, whatever they are. There's no reason why you can't start immediately making regular repayments to pay off the loan, because you just freed up whatever that monthly cash flow was.
You could, but depending on the situation, oftentimes, because a 401k loan is not credit based, right?
Right.
So if I have a client in a situation where we're planning on settling the debt, and we need to get a chunk of money from the 401k to essentially facilitate those settlements a lot sooner, because contrary to what debt settlement companies will tell you, and I say that with a grimace on my face. Is debt settlement is not about low monthly payments, dragging it out for 3 years, 4 years, saving $1,000 a month, and then eventually negotiating the debt. You can do it that way, but it's a slow, painful, horrible way to do it that the debt settlement companies pitch to you because it sounds really good, because the sales pitch is, hey, you're spending $1,500 a month on these minimum payments. Just hire us. We'll wave some magic pixie dust on this thing, and all you have to do is give us $1,000 a month. And everybody says, ooh, wow, $1,000 a month, that would help a lot. I'll do that. But that's not how you want to do it. If you're going to negotiate with a creditor, you want to get in and get out. You want to raise the funds as fast as you can, get a deal done, and move forward in your life. Start rebuilding your credit, move forward. You don't want to drag this out 3 or 4 years, unless you like lawsuits and things like that, because you can't not pay a creditor for 4 years and expect nobody to eventually say, we're not waiting anymore. But back to Steve's point, if I have a client in that situation, I'm not necessarily going to have them, because the 401k loan is not credit based. I don't need them to have the cash immediately right away. Once they start falling behind, there's going to be a window of at least 4, 5, 6 months before a creditor is even willing to negotiate. So usually what I would do is, work on the cash flow, work on the budget with the client. We let those payments go, and then we give it a month or two to let real life happen. Okay. You're paying $1,500 a month on these cards. We're going to let these go. Now, are you actually going to have $1,500 available? My guess is no, you won't, because usually most people, they're short and they were making minimum payments on the cards, but then spending the card at the gas station again, grocery store, things like that. So their shortfall is usually more than they think it is. But that sometimes is part of the process of figuring out what to do. This is why I don't have them pull money out of the 401k right away. Even if we're thinking, we can settle this debt. We don't want to do bankruptcy, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's okay. Well, let's not pay these credit cards for a month or two. Let's work on your budget, and let's track everything with software.
Yeah, that's a great approach.
Quicken or whatever. And let's see for the first 30 to 60 days, what your life actually looks like when you don't have access to these credit cards and you're not playing that game.
Yeah.
How much do you really have? How upside down are you? And that will give us actually a lot of insight that we wouldn't have had before, because using credit cards can cover up the bigger problem.
You're right.
Because you think, I'm going to stop paying these credit cards. That frees up $1,500 a month. That's my minimum payments. No, it doesn't, because if you're spending $1,500, but then you put $1,000 every month back on the credit cards, right? If you can't do that, now you're upside down even more than you thought you were. You have to live within the actual dollars that are coming in. So now we might figure out that you're in reality upside down $1,000 a month more than you realized.
Right.
Now we might be like, you know what? We weren't thinking about a bankruptcy, but this is going to be a bigger hurdle to overcome cash flow wise. Is there ways we can overcome that? You're going to start doing some DoorDash, some Instacart. You catch us on the Penny Stupid channel. There's some expenses we can cut out, but we're not pulling that money out of that 401k until we're absolutely sure that we are going to need it. I don't want to prematurely pull that trigger. So we've got about at least a 5-month window before I have them pull money out to where we make sure, okay, this is good. We're saving X amount of dollars. We've reconfigured our lifestyle. We've redone our budget, and we're moving forward now. We've been doing it in real life for a couple of months, and this can work for us. So yeah, we can avoid the bankruptcy, and we need to do this and make sense. So yeah, let's go ahead and pull that money out. Now we know we can live, at our current income level without those credit cards. So we're not going to get back, into this problem after pulling the 50 grand out of the 401k or whatever we're doing.
I want to explain the defaulting on the debt for a moment. The I'm doing air quotes just like you were grimacing. The debt settlement companies are telling you to default on your debt, for years into the future and don't worry about it. However, it's important to understand the reason why defaulting on your debt is going to be an inevitability is simply because it is a process problem. In order to get your account into the right department at the creditor, you need to be X days behind. You want to explain that any more clearer, Damon?
Yeah. And I'm not saying every client that calls me for advice, my advice is, okay, we're going to fall behind and see what happens. I'm just saying clients in that circumstance. I have plenty of clients where we're looking at traditional, if you want, I'm doing air quotes now, and a grimace face, Dave Ramsey style approach. And Dave Ramsey, I like a lot of his stuff. I just don't like the fact that he's so absolutist about everything. Everybody has to do this approach. But some people are in situations where just moving a few things around, we can dig out of that problem in a very traditional way, and that's fine. But yeah, so in terms of, having to default for settlement specifically, we're just talking about negotiating something with a creditor, whether we're negotiating your interest rates down, which can be done, and I do it a lot, or negotiating principal balances down. The way it works with creditors is it's very different than dealing with an individual. And like Steve said, it's just a process. So if you call your creditor up today and say, you know what, I lost my job, I can't pay the minimum payment, can we work out some kind of a deal? They're going to say no.
Right.
You're talking to the first line of defense, I call it, right? You're the customer service person. They're not empowered to do anything. You can't talk to them about settlement. You can't talk to them about negotiating interest rates. It's not until you get a couple of months behind are you even able to get on the phone with somebody that's even authorized to discuss the possibility of working out a deal.
Yeah, and the irony is they might sit right next to each other in different departments.
Yeah, and I mean, if you call up your creditor right now and you're making your payments on time and you ask them about, hey, do you guys ever settle debt? What are they going to say, Steve?
No, we never do that.
They're going to say, why would we do that? We don't do that. Right?
Yeah.
So a lot of it is very much a process oriented. Now, we're not saying just default on your debt and see what happens, but if you are in a situation where you need to renegotiate your debts, then you will have to fall behind on those debts in order to do it. But please do not do that until you have a strategy. Don't just do it to do it.
Yeah. And the other thing to remember is if the time comes that you do have to default on your debt, this is not going to screw you for the next 10 years. This is not the worst thing that's ever going to happen in your life. This is going to be something that can be quickly rebounded from. So don't be afraid of that if it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, that example I bring up often on the podcast, right, is that one client I had that called me. And we talked and we had a good in-depth conversation about her situation. And she owed, it was a couple $100,000. I don't remember the specifics now. And I never heard from her after that again until 10 years later, right? I get a random email I haven't talked to this lady in 10 years. And it was just one consultation we did. She never hired me. And she reached back out. She saved my email, or whatever for a decade and reached back out. And she said, look, I'm ready. I wasn't ready when we first talked, but I'm 10 years later and I owe more now than I did when we first talked.
Right.
But she was in a situation where she felt like she didn't want to, she didn't want to miss any payments, didn't want to do anything. She's really worried about her credit. And I was like, well, I understand that, but what you've been doing hasn't been working. Well, she tried it the other way, the traditional way, for 10 more years before she was just
lost 10 years of time doing that.
Yeah. And then, she ended up hiring me and we got all that debt resolved. I think it was less than a year. It was pretty close to a year. wasn't that much time, and it was several $100,000 that we got all resolved. And the reason I brought this up was once that was done, her credit rebounded fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Versus the whole 10 years that she was juggling all that debt and had those utilization rates so high, her credit wasn't very good anyway for a decade. But once we kind of ripped the Band-Aid off, it's going to, from a credit standpoint, it gets worse before it gets better if we're going to do that. But when you look at, okay, from the time we just said, screw it, let's rip the Band-Aid off, let's get you out of this debt. From that time, the credit went down to where it went back up much higher than it was the previous 10 years.
Yeah.
Because she was carrying all that debt. You start looking at that going, okay, my credit was took a hard hit, and everybody worries about, well, how low is it going to go? Like they always want a number. It doesn't matter. Once you get below 680, it doesn't matter if you have a 650, a 620, a 590. It doesn't matter. What matters is, did we get you out of the debt? Did we free up $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month that you can now start to build your future with? That's what matters, not what number TransUnion has for your FICO 8 today. That doesn't matter.
Yeah. And that number doesn't really mean anything about how well you manage your finances or anything else. That's a whole nother podcast we've done 2 or 3 times before. But
yeah, in fact, if you like Dave Ramsey, how does Dave Ramsey view FICO?
Yeah, I mean, he trashes it as well.
Yeah. But like I said, the famous example I saw him do was, he couldn't rent an apartment, but he, because he didn't have a FICO score because he doesn't use credit, but he could write a check and buy the whole building. And I was like, no, anybody that can write a check and buy the entire apartment building probably doesn't need to worry about credit, Dave.
Right.
But the ones that can't write a check and buy the apartment building,
they need credit.
It's easier to rent a freaking apartment, bro.
Yeah.
It's like not everybody can write that check, Dave.
All right, Damon, let's wrap it up here. Because we have
I said we'd come full circle. So the takeaway is there are times when you absolutely should use your 401k to get out of debt, and there are times when you absolutely shouldn't. Same goes with consolidation loans and home equity loans, especially. And if you're thinking about tapping into any of these things to deal with your debt, do not do anything until you look at all the different options, whether you want to call me or call somebody else. You won't be able to find anybody else that's as good as me, but I digress. But whoever you talk to, make sure you look at all the options. And the way I like to do it with clients is we look at everything, and through process of elimination, we find the right strategy, because it's usually not going to be something fun. You're not going to be doing backflips and cartwheels about this new strategy that has you dial back your lifestyle a little bit or fall behind on credit cards or go bankrupt. It's not going to be exciting, but the way you make those hard decisions is by looking at all the choices, and then you can decide what's the one that I dislike the least.
Right.
That's how you find it.
All right, Damon, let's say goodbye, and then we'll do the show after the show.
Okay.
All right. So until next time, Damon, for those that don't want to listen to the show after the show, I'm going to say, see ya.
Peace.
Now I can cough.
Well, you held it in pretty good.
Woo!
Steve's been fighting a sickness for like a month, and he goes, well, I'm not sick. I just got this thing in my throat.
I do. It's just right in my throat.
Well, you did pretty good the whole time. I didn't think we were going to be able to do the podcast today.
But you didn't see me pushing the mute button.
Oh. Well, I did kind of figure today was the day you were just going to let me just kind of go.
Yeah.
Not interrupt too much.
That's my job.
Now's my time to shine. He's not going to interrupt me. I can say whatever I want.
All right. Well, I hope that the number one message that people took away from that was get a plan. Get a plan.
We say that on every podcast. It's like maybe we should come up with a new word for it, like strategic deleveraging.
Yeah.
Well, we need a new word for a plan, because it's so boring, but it's just what you have to do. You have to not do anything rash. Just stop, take a step back, and let's figure out what the best way forward is before you make any decisions and pull any money out of anything or pay off any cards or do any of that stuff. Because like I said on the podcast, unfortunately, I get a lot of clients that have already done these things, and I can still help you for sure, 100%. But if you've already, I had a client just sign up last week, and we've got a lot of credit card debt. We've got a big consolidation loan, and we've got a 401k loan. He's already taken these things, and he actually makes really good income, so we can get this thing solved. But he did all those things first, and then he's still struggling from a cash flow perspective. And heard our podcast and was like, all right, maybe I need a second pair of eyes on this.
Yep.
And get this figured out. And it's like, yeah, I already kind of pretty much know what we're going to need to do. But had he been hopefully found us a year ago, if he had found us a year ago,
it would have been different.
I could have been out in front of that and be like, okay, before we borrow from the 401k, before we take this the consolidation loan, let's really figure everything out first, and then maybe strategically we'll do the 401k. But instead of just pulling it out dollar for dollar, maybe we pull out 50 to settle your 100. So now you still owe the 50 grand back to your 401k, but you wiped out 100,000 for that 50. So you got a 2-to-1 ratio on pulling it out there. And then it really kind of kicks the should I get the 401k loan, in favor? Because you said you got to analyze it and you got to look at, well, you could miss out on that future growth, of that 401k loan.
The example that I always used was, okay, so you just found out that you got a cavity and you have a drill in your garage and you have access to YouTube. Are you going to watch a YouTube video and take that drill and try to fix your cavity? People go, that's ridiculous. Well, you don't know what you don't know about dealing with your debt. So why are you going to run off and try to do it on your own? Something you have no experience with and no expertise in. And why isn't that ridiculous?
Well, but if you had an ice skate in your garage, I watch Castaway.
Yeah. Wilson. Got a money question keeping you up at night? Well, don't just Google it. Get real answers from real people who actually know what they're talking about. Head to getoutofdebt.org/podcast to ask your question, and you might hear it on an upcoming episode. But hey, if you'd rather keep it private, Damon Day has your back. Visit DAMONDAY.com because getting out of debt is easier with the right help. That's getoutofdebt.org/podcast, where smart money questions lead to smarter money moves.